I don't know if this is very well thought out. You put a preacher in a room to give 2 lessons and don't put a clock on the wall. So, I mean, we'll see how this goes. Okay, I'll do the best I can to work with this. Well, I hope you brought your hiking boots, and I hope they are laced up. I wonder if you don't mind, I might hit one of these lights, see if we can see just a little bit better. Because we are going on a hike. And in our first study, is everyone okay? You see all right? I think it's not too bad. Okay. We are going on a hike together, and hopefully by the time it's all said and done, we will go from a pretty deprived state. We're going to be helpless as we begin. But when we get done, we're going to be hopeful. And I can't wait to do this together. I think we'll find tremendous blessing in it. What we're going to do in our hike is we're going to go to a very special body of water. If you want to turn to John chapter 5, that's where we're going to be, John 5. And in just a moment, we will start reading from there. But before we do, I first want to tell you about a very special body of water to me. And as I put this body of water on the screen, I will inquire, does anyone recognize this special pool of water? Ah, you know me, don't you? And you probably know the area, too. Good job, Joe. You know everything. You know that? This is Mammoth Spring, Arkansas. Absolutely gorgeous. Everyone been there? Raise your hand if you have been there. I figure probably just, okay, quite a few haven't. That's a little surprising. All right. If you haven't, stop by sometime. Just across the Missouri line. You got Thayer as you're heading 63 south. Mammoth Spring is the next place. A tiny spot, only about 100 people live there. A few interesting facts about Mammoth Spring. It's appropriately named. It's Mammoth. It is big, a big spring. It's the largest spring in the state of Arkansas. It's the 3rd largest in the Ozark Plateau region, only behind number 2, Greer Spring, and number 1, appropriately named, Big Spring. That's the one that feeds Current River, and actually Big Spring is one of, if not the largest freshwater spring in the United States and up there in the world also. Absolutely enormous. Mammoth Spring puts out, I think it's like 460 cubic feet of water. So if you have a cube, that's 460 of those every second. That's a lot of water that constantly is churning out. Springs are mesmerizing things. But I tell you, to me, this is a very special place, and here's why. I never lived in Mammoth Spring, Arkansas. I've always loved it, though. My family lived in Mammoth Spring, Arkansas. My mom, my dad, and my 3 older siblings. They were all in Mammoth Spring for several years. Dad preached for the Get Well congregation. I don't know if any of you would have ever visited there. It's a small country church. You go out on a country road. To get there, it's not the main one in town, in Mammoth Spring. But Dad, he preached out of this country church, and of course we have, still to this day, lifelong friends from that area. And I never lived with a lot of these people, but I feel like, and they truly are, forever family. Well, I've always thought this is a really neat place and beautiful. My family has a connection here. But it's also special to me because in my freshman year of college, I met a very special young lady. And one of our first, not our very first, but one of our first dates was to Mammoth Spring, Arkansas. And if you're wondering, yes, her name is Vanessa. So now that we've established that, we went to the park. We enjoyed some time there. We also went to Woods River Bend Restaurant. Beautiful place. Anyone eating there? Oh, that's good food, isn't it? It was when we ate there. Fantastic. I'd really recommend it if you're in Mammoth Spring passing through and the place is open. So we had this really memorable date there. Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to fast forward 2.5 years. I was in preaching school. Vanessa, she was at Missouri State, like SMS still at the time. And I knew, well, I'd known for a long time, but I knew she was the one. And we had one of our first dates here. And this is such a meaningful place to my family. So on a Saturday, we both had really hectic schedules by that point as juniors in college and working on the side and all that kind of stuff. And I said, why don't we run down from Springfield to Mammoth Spring, Arkansas, as if that wouldn't put up the red flag, you know. I don't know. We have oh, come on, I really wanted, okay, I finally was able to twist her arm to get her down there. And as we were walking in a scenic place and we got back away from people in February of the year and on this really nice path, yeah, I popped the question to her. She wasn't expecting it at all, and it took about 15 minutes of convincing, and she said, all right, fine, I'll be here. And the rest is history. Well, this is a very special place to me, this pool of water. And I still love, like, when we're heading to Florida or, somewhere down south, and we travel by Mammoth Spring. We don't usually have time, but I love just every now and then drop in there. Special pool of water. I can tell you that at this pool of water, I went from being a helpless male to being hopeful. And the reason is I found the person with whom I'd spend the rest of my life in this place. Well, we're going to be talking about a very special pool of water today in John, the 5th chapter. And I will say to you that there's a guy here who goes from being a helpless male to being hopeful because he finds the person with whom he wants to spend not only the rest of his life, but as well all eternity. So let's start with this helpless guy in chapter 5 of John and reading verse 1. After this, there was a feast of the Jews. They always have these festivals going on. And Jesus went up to Jerusalem. What feast do you think is going on here at this moment? Or we're about to anyway. John 5 verse 1. After this, there's a feast of the... Which one? I love the silence. And why should you be silent right now? Okay, could be Jubilee. Passover maybe. I like the answers, Justin. The Bible's silent on this, right? And so that's good. Where the Bible's silent, we can... No, there's nothing wrong with this. I'm the same way. I'm trying to go through. I wonder if it's this one or this one. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fine, right? Keep your spot right here. Turn back to Deuteronomy chapter 16. The Jews have all kinds of to us, potlucks. Kind of like that. All kinds of potlucks. They celebrate together and on religious occasions, just like we do. But I'm going to say it's probably one of 3 very special Jewish feasts. Let's read Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16. So God, in giving the old law, he says, 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose. At the feast of unleavened bread, which commences with Passover, Passover and the feast of unleavened bread. And then there's the Feast of Weeks, starting with Pentecost. All right, then you have a week that you celebrate. And then finally, in the year, there will be the Feast of Booths. An easy way of remembering when these occur is you have month 1, month 3, month 7. And to me, that seems kind of easy to remember because those are 3 of the most important Bible numbers. The number of unity, 1. The number of divinity, 3. The number of perfection. Yeah, quick learners, aren't we? Perfection, and the number 7. And so you have these 3 major feasts. Why do you think I suggest going back to our passage, John 5, verse 1? After this, there was a feast of the Jews. Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Why do you think I might suggest it's probably one of 3 feasts and not one of the other X amount? Thank you, Joe. He's a male, and all males were required to go where? Jerusalem. Now, we're not told that in Deuteronomy, bless you, because we haven't yet found out that that's the place that the Lord, our God, will name. That takes place during the reign of David, right about 1000 BC, and it continues into the life of Christ. So about 3 millennia, this has been going on. All males following the law of Moses know that we need to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to say it's probably either the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, or the Feast of Tabernacles, or Booths, because Jesus goes up to Jerusalem. Go down to verse 2 of our passage, John 5. Now, there is in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate. What do you think the purpose of the sheep gate is? Okay, we're pretty sharp, aren't we? Right? So, that's the sheep gate. Oh, what do you use that for? It's the sheep gate. So a gate is what you pass through, and a sheep is an animal. So the sheep go through this gate. Now there is in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, a pool, as in a pool of water. Why would you have a pool of water, do you think, right beside the sheep gate? There you go. Yeah, they've probably been led, right? You don't drive sheep like you do cattle. They've probably been led around, and as they enter into the city, especially for these feasts, they're thirsty. And so you say, hey, stop right here, and you could drink from it. That'd make a lot of sense. Also, when you see the word pool, what do you do in a pool? You swim. And it's thought that people could have swam here, some. It's also thought this is probably a place, I know this sounds really strange to us because it's a public location, but it probably was also a location of bathing. Now, don't get all creeped out. It's not like exactly the way we would bathe in private, okay? You would have something still on, probably loose fitting, as you would clean up in it. But you have this pool of water where animals can stop and drink. I mean, people can if you're kind of hard up for the type of water you'd like to drink. You might stop and cool off in it, swim around. If you're dirty, you can get in it. It's a public place, and you can clean up. There is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda. You have another translation there? Or center column, footnote reference. What does Bethesda from Hebrew mean?
Place of mercy.
Oh, it's a place, or it could be translated, it's a house of mercy. This is a place where mercy is found. Hang on to that little tidbit. Having 5 porches, and you can see kind of similar to this, these are like overhangs. At our pool, at our house, we have a table down by it. And in the middle of that table, there's a hole. Why in the world would you put a hole in the middle of a table? There you go. Yeah, good, man. This guy, he's like Joe. He knows everything. Good job, Shane. You put an umbrella in there. Why do you want an umbrella by a pool? Shade, man. It gets hot. And that reflection of off the water of the sun. You go right ahead, Roy. Thank you for patiently waiting.
Well, I was just thought there was some correlation between Sheepgate and the pool of Bethesda, between Jesus, the Lamb of God, and the pool of Bethesda, the place of salvation and mercy.
Excellent. I believe there is. Very good, Roy. Thank you for that. So, by the way, if sheep are going in by the sheep gate, who's always going in front of them, leading them, the shepherd. So think about that. You have the Lamb of God, who's also the shepherd of God's sheep, entering by the sheep gate where there's this pool of water where it's a house of mercy. The mercy of God is found. I love the mind of the Lord, don't you? It's just absolutely astounding. Thank you for bringing that in, Roy.
Baptismal would be a place of salvation and mercy.
And any house you pass through, by the way, connected to water, or enter into, yeah, good. Verse 3, in these 5 porches, lay a great multitude. This is another purpose you're really needing shade right here. Of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. Okay, let's pause right there. Waiting for the water to move. You don't have to answer out loud, but just think when you bathe today, in what type of water do you like to bathe? Probably some do, and that's okay. I'm not criticizing you, okay? I don't do bathtubs. That's gross to me, okay? I can't. I know it's fresh water you're running in. I don't care. I'm not doing. I remember my grandmother, when I'd go stay with her, I would be in this bathtub for like an hour, playing with all my toys and the little dinosaur you had. You could make it inhale and squirt water out of its mouth. Oh man, I had so much fun. Just stay and stay. And then I get kind of cool. Grandma, I'm cold. Okay, she'd come in and run me some more hot water. I was the youngest of the grandchildren, so I got everything I wanted. Well, then whenever I'd get done, I'd been all cleaned up and been hanging out in there for an hour. Then Grandma, after I got out, would run some more hot water and get in and take her bath. I can't do that, Even if it's just me who's been in there. No, I want a shower. That makes sense to me. There's stirring, there's movement of the water. This is a pool. Every pool of any size, what does it have hooked up to it? Essentially. There you go, a pump and a skimmer, so it sucks in. You have an inlet and it filters through, and you have an outlet. Why? Stirs the water. If you don't have a stirring of the water, it gets stagnant. You got a place where people are just swimming and where the sun's hitting that water. At times when people are bathing, you're going to want the water to be stirred. But this is a different kind of stirring the water and for a different sort of purpose. All these sick people, those who are blind, lame, paralyzed, they were waiting for this stirring, the moving of the water. Listen to this, verse 4. John says, for an angel. Yeah, we know that word, angelos, Greek, it's just messenger. And this could be a public official. A human being is sent down maybe to stir the water. But you read on, I don't think that this is a human being that's being described. For a messenger went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water, then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. I don't think this is a messenger of a governor or a judge or anything like that. I think this is a messenger of heaven and someone that God sends down.
These people were already aware.
Oh, yes.
They went into the water. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the reason why the lame was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're waiting. But it's interesting how this works. You have to be the first one in because there's only one person who will be healed. So it's almost a matter of who wants it the most. Okay? And I think that's a real demonstration of faith. I want to know I want it. And you want to get in there because of this strong trust in heaven's power. If you read a lot of Bible commentaries, there'll be remarks along the lines of, well, this is kind of a superstition and it's thought. I'm going to take the Spirit at His word here. He doesn't say, people believe that. It says, this is something that happened. I believe it actually occurred. And I think this is a time period when God is really showing His care for His people and how much I want to help you and demonstrating because of what's coming down the line. Look at what I can do for your body, and then just think about what I can do for your insides. Verse 5, now a certain man was there who had an infirmity, some kind of sickness or disease, for 38 years. 38 years. Verse 6, when Jesus saw him lying there, what problem does this guy have? He's lying there. He doesn't appear to be moving, or from what we find later, maybe even able to move. Yeah, that's the issue, it seems. He's in the very least lame. The fact that he's lying there and not sitting, I think he's probably paralyzed. He'd fall into that category. Of course, you can be a paraplegic or I think there's a good chance this guy's a quadriplegic. He may be paralyzed from the neck down. Now, I want you to imagine if for 40 years, that's if you live a long, normal, healthy life, that's half of your life, entire life, and for this guy, maybe basically all of it, he hasn't moved. I mean, that would be miserable, wouldn't it? And Jesus approaches this guy, sees him lying there in that condition for 38 years, and he knew that he'd already been in that condition a long time. Well, he's got those smarts. He literally, we're joking earlier about knowing everything. He literally knows everything, this guy. And he knows his whole life what it's been like. He says to him, do you want to be made well? Now, if you look in verse 7, the guy doesn't even answer the question. I don't think this is intended to solicit like a yes or no kind of answer. This is a rhetorical question, right? Do you like how life's been for you for the last 4 decades, or are you interested in trying something different by this point? Well, obviously, he wants to be healed, but there's a problem here. Verse 7, the sick man answered him, Sir, very respectful guy, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming, another steps down before me. Okay, so maybe he's a paraplegic. Maybe it's neither one of those. Maybe he is just really sick and has no strength to be able to. But whatever it is, he can't get to the pool fast enough. And there are two ways of looking at this. I think our response tends to be, they're scoundrels, aren't they? This poor guy trying to get in the water. And, well, hang on here. Who else is found in this place underneath the porches? It's not just this guy. Who else? People just like him. And maybe they've suffered for 50 years and 60 years or 38, just like he has. So, I feel like we need to look at it from other people's perspective too, and they want to be healed just like this guy wants to be healed. Do you blame him for that, Joe?
I think it's really interesting, and we can take a lesson from the question and then the response. Jesus asked him a simple question. You want to be healed? Jesus knows the answer, first of all, because obviously he knows everything, but as well, the man's at the pool that heals. He's there. That's what he wants. But what does the man do instead of answering the question? He tells him his problem.
Right.
Jesus wants us to follow him. I think about the rich young ruler who has the excuses. And how many times do we come to Jesus with our excuses?
Yeah.
You know, Jesus is asking us daily, do you want to follow me? Do you want to be my child? Do you want to do work in my kingdom? And what do we often come to him with? Well, work is this, and the kids have this, and the yard needs mowed. Right? I think it's a very good lesson for the way we live our lives.
Yeah, and right.
He just wants to know, do you want to be healed? Well, he shows this man he can be healed. If we want to be healed, he can do the same thing spiritually.
So if we would keep things as simple as God wants to keep them, it might expedite the process a little bit, right? And we turn it into a little good show. I hadn't thought about that. Any others up to this point? So this guy would love to be healed. He can't get to the water fast enough. You know, how am I ever going to be healed if I can't get down there and be the first in the water? This guy is helpless. Well, Jesus is about to produce some hope in this man's heart. Verse 8, Jesus said to him, not anymore, rise, take up your bed, and walk. The house of mercy, beside a pool of water, near the sheep gate where the animals pass through, but not before the shepherd goes through before them. He says, okay, this is the way. Usually you have to wait on this. Well, he hasn't revealed to him who he is right now. He says, we're not even going to go through the formality of all this process. I'll just take care of it for you right here and now. Get up and walk. You think this guy's ever heard that in his life? Your problem of 38 years, you never have to worry about it again. Well, no one would dare say that because no one can do anything about it. This guy says, I guarantee you won't have that issue moving forward. I'm sure there's a burden that maybe could be lifted from this guy's heart. Jesus provides for him what no one else can do. Verse 9, immediately, and that's how fast too. As soon as the words fall out of his mouth, it's all gone. What the problem is. Immediately, the man was made well, took up his bed, and walked. Jesus could provide this benefit to anyone in any place. So why do you think he goes to this place and to provide this benefit for this man? And even if he wants to help this man, why does he wait on this day in this setting to do it for this man? I ask you to go back where we began in verse 1. What's taking place right now? This is a feast of the Jews. And Jesus feels the need during this feast to go up to Jerusalem. That only happens 3 times a year, when it's either the Feast of Passover, the Feast of Pentecost, or the Feast of Booths and Tents and the respective weeks that are associated with them. I want you to keep your spot here. Go back to Deuteronomy 16, where we were earlier. And as you're turning there, I'm going to reread what we considered a moment ago. Deuteronomy 16, verse 16. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place that he will choose, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and at the Feast of Booths. But he gives them this specific commandment. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. What does he mean by that? Verse 17. Every man, no one excepted, shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord your God that he has given you. Now, he doesn't say everyone will give something, as in like money, but he says as he is able, or as he has been blessed. That's what you're to do. Turn to Luke chapter 9. Luke 9. Here in just a minute, we'll return to our passage and get back to business. Welcome on in. Yeah, come in, guys. Great to have you. Thank you for being here. We're studying John chapter 5, and we're in Luke 9, making a cross-reference right here. Luke chapter 9, verses 57 and 58. What do we know about Jesus and economics? As they're going along the road, someone said to him, I will follow you, Lord, wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, okay, cool. Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests. By the way, foxes and birds, they carry around wallets. You ever notice that? They have bank accounts and retirements. And I never known that a fox or a bird to have any money. Jesus goes on to say, they're better off than I am. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. This guy doesn't have a whole lot of anything economically during his life to his name. But we also know there's a requirement under the law of Moses, Deuteronomy 16. 3 times all your males shall appear before God in the place he's chosen to put his name. That becomes Jerusalem during the lifespan of David. It continues for 1,000 years until the time of Christ. And Jerusalem's still around even today, but a little different purpose. But the point being this, he says, and when you show up, no one is going to come empty-handed. You are to give to the Lord your God as he's blessed you. This guy doesn't have a whole lot of economic blessing. But he's still under commandment, isn't he? He needs to give as God has given to him. One more time, I ask you to turn to Acts, the 3rd chapter. It just really reminds me of this, where we have some more detail. And this is where Paul and John are going into the temple at the hour of prayer. And as they're going in, there's this sight that's before them. Acts 3, first verse, Peter and John, they're going up to the temple, the hour of prayer. It's the 9th hour, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And a man lame from birth, he has the same problem as this guy. He can't walk, except for him, we're told, he never has in all of his life. He's laid at the gate called Beautiful to ask alms of those entering the temple. He sees Peter and John about to go into the temple, and he asks, hey, will you give me some money? And Peter directed his gaze at him, as did John, and said, look at us. And he fixed his attention at them, expecting to receive something from them. You have someone who can't walk and obviously is in a state where he can't work. And so if you're a person of the Lord and God's immensely blessed you in your life and you're entering into a church building and you're going to worship him, what should you do right here? So, hey, will you give me some food or some money so I can get some food tonight to eat? Isn't that an obligation that you should feel? Yeah, I need to help this person out. I mean, this isn't someone putting on a show right here. Someone who's genuinely in need. Peter and John, stingy. They don't give him anything, but not because they don't want to. It's because they can't. They don't have the economics to help him out. Peter said, I have no silver and gold, but what I do have, I give to you. They understand the principle of giving, right? It may be that economically we haven't received anything to be able to pass on to you. But God has given us something that we can pass along to you. He says, in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. He took him by the right hand, raised him up. Immediately his feet and his ankles were made strong. And leaping up, he stood, began to walk, entering the temple with them, walking, leaping, and praising God. All the people saw him walking and praising God, and recognized him as the one who sat at the beautiful gate of the temple asking for alms. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. You realize that Peter and John, as they go into the temple, they have given the most wonderful gift to God. Well, wait a minute. They didn't give anything to God. They gave to this guy. How does God end up benefiting from a gift they give that's not even monetary to this guy? Because with the healing that he receives, he uses that strength to honor God, and all this attention is brought to God because of what he gave that wasn't money. I know that's a decent amount of sidetracking, but I want to go back to our text of John 5. After this, there's the Feast of the Jews. Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Not only is he required to keep this feast in Jerusalem, but also he is not to go up empty-handed. He has nothing to speak of in this life. But as God has given to him, he is to pass along and to give. I think this may actually be the fulfillment of Old Testament law. Look, silver and gold I don't have. But what God has given me, as he's commanded me, I do pass along to you. Immediately the man was made well. He took up his bed and he walked. What a wonderful story. And Jesus helps this guy. He heals him who's in need. And I guess we can just quit right there. But the story doesn't quit right there, does it? It continues. And the reason for this is the poor guy's about to be heckled, the one who's been healed by Jesus. The end of verse 9, the problem is, quote unquote problem, that day was the Sabbath. Well, why is that a problem? What difference does it make when God gives you a benefit? Well, oh, these people say so. That's the day you're supposed to be resting. You're not supposed to be exerting any effort. How do we know that? Verse 10, the Jews therefore said to him who was cured, it is the Sabbath. It's the day of rest. It's the day of non-exertion. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. So they say you violated the law. Have you ever looked through the law of Moses and ever found the place that God says, you shall not carry your bed on the Sabbath day? That's not God's law. It's a law. Whose law is this? It's man's law that's been created. And they say, you violated our law, and therefore you violated God's law. That's not the way that works. They're confused about that. Man's laws do not equal God's law. It doesn't matter how good our intentions are behind it. We think, well, if we erred on the side of caution, I like to say, let's not err at all. Would not be better than erring, period. They're trying, I think, to err on the side of caution. They end up erring because they're erring. Stop it. Just do what God says. Teach what God says. Don't make laws where He doesn't have laws. And everything will be just fine.
What about Romans 13, be subject to the governing authorities?
Right.
Unless, of course, it violates God's law.
Yeah. And then he mentions that. He says, for the authorities that are in place have been appointed by God to, and so He's given them permission. Yeah, you're exactly right. So there is a civil laws to be followed, but we do know, Acts 5, when that's in conflict, Peter says we have to obey God rather than man. But yeah, that's true for civil law. We're talking about a religious plane. Let's say me, I'm up preaching a lesson here in a little bit, and I say, well, you shouldn't do this and this. That's unlawful to do that. I don't have the right to make that law. Now, if God said that, that's okay, right? And I can show you from His law. But if I can't show you from His law, I have no right to tell you something is unlawful for you to do or to refrain from doing, which is what these people were doing. Joe?
Well, who had just told him to pick up his bed?
Oh, okay. Yeah, who is that guy?
He's God.
And elsewhere, what does he say about himself relative to the Sabbath? I am what of the Sabbath? Jesus. Lord. Yeah, I'm in charge of this. I don't answer to the Sabbath. Now, that's not to say he violated, living as a man. But what he's saying is, listen, I'm not answerable to the Sabbath. The Sabbath answers to me, okay? The Sabbath didn't create me. I created the Sabbath. Very good, Joe. He's Lord of the Sabbath, and God has the right to clarify. Well, under the Old Testament, and you can look back on this if you want yourself, God did have rules about the Sabbath. It is a day of rest. But He says 6 days you shall work, and then in contrast, on the seventh, which is a Sabbath, which means rest, not seventh, but on the seventh, it's a Sabbath or a day of rest. That's the contrast. What kind of work was being done those first 6 days? Was it moving a bed in the house? Or?
Creation.
Okay, creation. Very good. So originally it was creation. And then for people, what kind of work was being done for the first 6 days of the week? Okay, why were they doing agricultural work, do you think? Yeah. There you go, sweat of their brow to eat. That's their jobs back then. It's like for us. It's what we call our 9 to 5. Wouldn't that be nice? Doesn't always work that way. Maybe it's our 6 to 6, a little bit better. But and 5 days a week or 6 days a week. What he's talking about your servantile work, what you do to make if that's the case, you can't exert any effort. Could you crawl out of bed on the Sabbath? Could you fry some eggs in the morning? Is that too much exertion? Would that be a violation of the... You know what I'm saying? I mean, you can get so nitpicky. It's like, that's not even the spirit behind what God is saying. He's talking about like work that you would do to make money, to make a living. So, carrying your bed on the Sabbath after God has helped you out to heal you. Does that sound like work to make money? No, it's just taking care of somebody who's in need. Jesus answered him, backing up, but Jesus therefore said to him who was cured, it is the Sabbath, it's not lawful for you to take your bed. So the guy who was healed, he answered them, he who made me well said to me, Joe, this guy told me to do it. He said, take up your bed and walk. And I think what he means by that perhaps is, obviously the power of God's behind him to be working, and he told me to do this. Then they asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, the multitude being in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, he's not done with this guy. He's healed him, and now he wants to help him to grow. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple, and he said to him, "See, you've been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." We often think the sicknesses and the disease and all these maladies we have to face, and isn't that the most awful thing? And please, I don't mean that insensitively. There's some terrible things out there. There's something far worse than being really sick for years. Far worse than spending an entire lifetime, say 70, 80 years, not being able to walk, not being able to do anything functioning from the neck down. What's way worse than that? To be lost in your sins and to be in misery in your soul and your body as they're recombined in the resurrection to spend an eternity in suffering. That's far, far worse. Joe?
Credit to this man, he has an experience with Jesus, not knowing who Jesus is. He's had an experience with a messenger from God, let's say.
Yeah.
Where do we find him the very next time we encounter him? He's in the temple. He's gone to the house of God.
That is.
That man, for what he did.
You think he might be the one who returns? Good, Joe. I glossed over that too, so I appreciate you bringing that out. All right, let's finish this up. I think this man who's been helped now sees, hey, as God has given to me, now it's my chance to give to others. Verse 15, the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. We know nothing of the guy's intentions, but I have a suspicion that probably having experienced this tremendous benefit from Christ, he wants everyone else to know, hey, look, this is what this guy did for me. Probably, I bet he can help you out also, is probably what he has in mind. Unfortunately, the Jews don't take it that way. For this reason, the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him. I want you to think about the irony that's involved. Jesus wants to end people's suffering. He wants to help them, to heal them. He wants to give life to people who are dead, for people who are lost. He wants them to be forgiven. And the Jews said, that's enough. We can't have any more of that. So what exactly do you want for people then? I think they'd rather them be sick. I think they'd rather them die. I believe they would rather them be lost. Now, they're not going to say that, but that's really what's going on the inside. That's a sad statement, isn't it? But Jesus answered them, my Father has been working until now, and I have been working. This has happened on the Sabbath day. I believe what he's saying is justification is, look, God created, he worked very hard in creation for 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh day. But that doesn't mean that he did nothing on the seventh day. That doesn't mean that he would do nothing for all the rest of eternity. In fact, you have just seen he does very powerful things on the Sabbath day. He rested from the creative work. God said, you also rest from your servile work or what's in your field to make money on the seventh day. But as I've set the example, I also want you still to be exerting effort to do good for people, even on the day of rest. Verse 18, therefore the Jews sought all the more to kill him. We can't have this guy healing people, their sicknesses, and raising people from the dead. We can't have this guy forgiving people's sins. What do you want for them? Because he not only broke the Sabbath, not really, but their rules about the Sabbath, but also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. You are what your father is. You are what your mother is. Why am I a human being? I have two human parents, and you are on a plane of equality with your parents. Jesus, because of his mother, what is he? Because of his mom, what was Jesus?
Son of man.
Okay, he's a man. But if God is his father, what is he?
Our God.
Oh. You see, and people connected those dots. What kind of a guy are we dealing with right here? They say, we got to kill him. We can't have that going on. A human claiming to be God. That doesn't make any sense. That's blasphemy. Is it? Or is it an encounter with the Good Shepherd at a pool of water, at the house of mercy? Is it a situation that everyone who goes by a pool of water at a house of mercy and comes into the presence of the Good Shepherd who's completely helpless can leave hopeful because they found someone with whom not only they can spend the rest of their lives and be married to him, but as well for all eternity. Is it possible that everyone who encounters him at the house of mercy by a pool of water, Roy, could find new life in him when they walk away? What an amazing man, what an amazing God our Savior is. I appreciate your good attention and the things brought out. Any other remarks or questions before we dismiss, just for a few before worship? Yes, Joe?
Well, we're in the book of John, and the whole theme, you know, of the apostles' writing is to prove the deity of Christ.
Right.
And you see it over and over and over and over and over again. And going back to the response of the religious leaders at this healing, I'm reminded of the same response they had at the raising of Lazarus. They're so concerned with losing their position of power in this religious world that they sought to kill him. They're so worried about losing what influence they have rather than what's best for people they're supposedly watching out for. And it's just a sad testimony to the state of those people. You know, it's a theme again throughout the book of John.
It is, and unfortunately it's not a beautiful remark, but it's very well said. Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. These guys are still on their walkabout, trying to find themselves, right? Instead of the turnabout and coming to the common point of Jesus. Thank you, Joe. We'll close there. Appreciate you all.